In 1980, after the Recreation Center failed at the ballot box, it was thought that maybe we would try it in a phased part, and maybe the library was the best thing to go for first. So what we talked about it, a group of us, what in the world could we do to try to get a library district, the library movement passed in Arnold, and it was decided that maybe the best way to do it was to start small and try to get a bookmobile. If we could get a bookmobile in Arnold a couple days a week and put it on one of the shopping center's parking lots, maybe that would be all it took to get people interested in the library part of the complex, and we would try for that first. So I was very, very frustrated. I mean, I was still a young fellow back then, and I'm running around trying to get converts to talk about the Recplex and talk about the library. But I used to stop by, like I did with Joe Wimmermuley, about once or twice every couple weeks. I would stop by and see my friend Jim Rickman, which was the superintendent of Fox C6 School District at that time. I would peck on his glass with a key, and he would grab 2 sodas out of the soda machine, set them up, open them up. I would come through, and he would always call me Brother Phil. And he would say, Brother Phil, I got the cold sodas waiting, and sit down and let's talk. We would talk, there'd be nobody there. We would talk for a half hour, and we would talk about dreams or problems he had or problems I had. He knew that this bookmobile problem was on my mind. I didn't know how to solve it. I was frustrated. He knew that. So after we talked for a while and finished our soda, he said, Phil, I want to take you down the hall, and I want to introduce you to a guy. To be honest with you, I wasn't really in the mood that day to meet anybody. I was kind of down because I had hit another brick wall on this bookmobile. But he took me down to the end of the hall, and he introduced me to a guy named Noah Gray. And he said, Phil, Noah Gray is the retired superintendent for Lindbergh High School. And I said, well, okay. And we sit down, and Noah Gray and I and Jim Rickman got into this about a half-hour discussion about all kinds of things. Community projects, things that I was interested in. If I could wave a magic wand, what would it be? And somehow the conversation kind of got around to the bookmobile and the frustration I was having trying to get one. And I didn't know how to go about getting one from St. Louis County because that Merrimack River was like the Berlin Wall. How was I going to get another county to bring a bookmobile into St. Louis County? So after we talked for a little while, I remember Jim getting up and said, I've got to go back to the office and make a phone call. And Phil, why don't you and Noah continue to visit a little bit? And when he got to the door, he turned around and he said, oh, by the way, Phil, I forgot to tell you, not only is Noah Gray the retired superintendent for Lindbergh School District, but he's also president of the St. Louis County Library Board. And I remember when he said that, I remember tears coming to my eyes. I knew I had both guys in the room that would be able to complete a part of the dream of getting library service for the kids and for the families of Arnold. And then for the next 10 minutes, we sit down and we talked about what was going to happen next, that Noah Gray was going to have the guy head of the library district, which is a guy named Don Gertner, call me, and we would go through the dissertation of what was needed and what hoops we had to jump through to get the bookmobile into Arnold, and that's exactly what happened. The bookmobile was brought in 2 days a week, and it was brought in from like 7 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night. And we were checking out more books out of that bookmobile twice a week than anybody could believe. The strain on that little bookmobile was unbelievable, and I would get reports. Don Gertner, the head of the library, would call me at night, and he was even amazed at how much that little bookmobile was being used twice a week. And then he asked me, he says, you know, Phil, we do a summer reading program for the kids through the school districts in a cooperation with all the school districts in St. Louis County. What do you think about us doing that in Arnold, even though the kids will have a disadvantage because they only have 2 days a week to get the books? But I said, yeah, let's try it. And everybody was shocked. We were checking out more books out of that bookmobile for kids 2 days a week than some of his branches were doing for 7. That's when we knew that we were on the right track. We formed a committee. The committee was still the nucleus of Eric Knoll, Joe Wimmermuley, the fire chief, and we had Vernon Sullivan and Mark Powell. and we added Laverne Friedman. She took care of the elementary and secondary schools along with Sandy Kohler. We had Charlie White, and we had Al Ims, the mayor. And we would meet about an hour, hour and a half, about once a week at the firehouse, and we did that for about a year and a half. By this time, unfortunately, Roy Poncho, that had helped us with the 1980 campaign, had moved to St. Genevieve, and Jim Rickman had retired and moved to Poplar Bluff, so they were unable to help us. But we knew to be able to do a library district financially, we needed it bigger than Arnold. And we knew passing it on a countywide basis was going to be impossible. So we knew the library law was going to have to be changed, and we were going to have to get converts and people to support that. So Eric Knoll, one afternoon when we were discussing it, he sat down with a pad and a pencil and wrote an amendment to the existing library law by looking at some state statutes that the fire chief had lying there. And it was about 3 sentences, and it was doing a different political subdivision like the school district boundaries. So we used the boundaries later on as the Fox-Windsor School District to have enough money to be able to produce the libraries that would be first class for the people. Eric wrote that, Charlie, and he wrote it in about 15 minutes. And Charlie White took it to a young state representative named Bill McKenna. Bill McKenna took it to Jefferson City, and luck was great to us during that time period. And there was a bill already in a committee that was getting ready to come out that had to do with libraries. So Bill asked the sponsor of the bill if he could just tag this little amendment on. He did. It came out within a week. It went to the full House and was passed. So within 2 weeks, we had changed the state law. But the interesting thing to me was the little amendment that Eric had written, it took him about 15 minutes, wasn't changed. Not one comma was changed in those 3 sentences that he had put down. And he wasn't a lawyer, but he had written a lot of ordinances being a city administrator. So Eric was responsible for changing a state law. And that was kind of exciting. And then we were off to the races. Dr. Charles Hudson from the school was involved in the committee. He coined the phrase from the Monopoly board game, all along the Reading Railroad. We put that on stickers, and we passed 5,000 stickers out at the Arnold Parade and the picnic, and we used that on everything, all aboard the Reading Railroad. And it was the night that passed was probably, it passed by almost 70% of the votes in the Fox-Windsor district. It was probably one of the greatest nights of my life. And I know a lot of the other people that served on the committee. Eric Knoll had told me it was the greatest feeling he had ever had in anything that he had ever done working in the community.